Okay, this is homework help for Unit 4, Worksheet 3, adding and subtracting rational expressions. So we're going to start with number 1D. So the first thing I want to do is whenever I have a subtraction is I want to make sure I distribute that in so I don't forget that it applies to the entire numerator. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute the negative into the 1 and the 3x. So this fraction will stay the same. And then I'm going to change the subtraction to addition, and then positive 1 will turn into negative 1, and then a negative times a negative will be a positive. And then the denominator will stay the same. So I have a common denominator. That means I can just add my numerator together. So I'm going to look for like terms that will combine. So I know I can combine the 5x and the 3x. And I know the 16 and the negative 1. So nothing combines to the x squared. And then 5 and 3 are 8. And 16 and negative 1 is positive 15. And I do not combine the denominators, it stays the same. And then once I get to here, I want to try to factor. So for x squared plus 8x plus 15, I have a trinomial, and with a trinomial, I want to list my factors. So x squared breaks up to x and x, and 15 can either be 1 and 15 or 3 and 5. And I want to look at the pair of numbers that will work to also give me the 8 when I add. So 1 and 15 won't work, so I know it'll be 3 and 5. So then when I write my grouped terms, we'll have an x in each grouping, and then they both have to be positive to get a 15. Positive 15 when I multiply, and a positive 8 when I add. So that will be x plus 3 and x plus 5. And then for the denominator, I can't factor anything out, but I can always take out at least a 1. And then I look for things that are common, and that's the x plus 3. And so then my final answer is x plus 5 over 1, but I don't need to write the over 1. Okay, and then let's take a look at number 1, and then this is F. So this is out of order here, so I want to rewrite that, and I'm also going to, at the same time, distribute that negative. So the first fraction stays the same, and then I'm going to add and distribute the negative into the numerator. So this will be turn into negative x and negative 1. And then over here, I'm going to put the x term first, and then the constant. So these denominators are not the same, so I want to go ahead and factor out the negative out of here, and then get a common denominator. So if I want to get a common denominator, they both have an x minus 2, but that has a negative 1. And so I have a lot of different choices I can do with that, but I'm going to stick with just get a common denominator theme. And so for this fraction right here, I want to multiply by negative 1 over negative 1. And then that way they'll both have negative 1 and x minus 2 in the denominator. So when I multiply, I'll get negative x over negative 1, x minus 2, and then negative x minus 1 over negative 1 times x minus 2. So since I have a common denominator, I can go ahead and combine my numerator. So here I have a negative x, I can combine with a negative x. So negative 1x and negative 1x is a negative 2x, and then negative 1 doesn't have anything to combine with. So one thing when I look at this, I have like a lot of negatives, and I have a leading coefficient of a negative. So that means I want to take out that negative. So instead of taking out just a 1, I'm actually going to take out a negative 1. Then my negative 1 reduces, and I'm left with just 2x plus 1 over x minus 2. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take a look at, oops, the back side. Okay, so this is letter M. So for letter M, I want to completely factor, right? So I have a trinomial. So I want to factor these. So I'm going to multiply by a smaller denominator than if I don't factor. So this works because negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, and then when I add it, I also get the negative 1. And then for here, when I list my factors, this would be x and 1 and 1. And there's no other way to get around that. So for here, I want to look to try to get a common denominator. So let me scoop this adding over. So here, this has 2x plus 1s, but that only has one of them. So then I'm going to multiply by x plus 1 over x plus 1. And so now I have 2 here and 2 there. And then this one needs an x minus 2. So now if I look, I have the denominators are matching in both fractions. And then I want to distribute the 1 in to both. So I'll have 1 times x and then 1 times 1 all over my common denominator. So if I have 2 that are the same, I can write that as a squared, right? And then do the same here. So I'm going to distribute the 1 in. So 1 times x and 1 times negative 2. And then again, I have 2x plus 1s. So I'm going to write it as a squared. And then x minus 2. So they have a common denominator, and once they get a common denominator, then I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms in the numerator. So I have an x that I can combine to the x, and then I have a 1 that I can combine with a negative 2. So x plus x is 2x, and 1 and negative 2 is negative 1. All over my common denominator. And then nothing factors or reduces any further, so then that would be my final answer.